Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Amriteshwariye Namaha. Thanks for joining us again tonight. Tonight we'll be trying to answer some of the questions, or all of the questions that have accumulated over the past week or so. Didn't get a chance to do that, so I will be trying to respond to those, and we have a number of them, so we'll get started. One other thing that I should mention before, though, the reason why we do question and answer regularly is not only just because people have questions, spiritual questions, but because resolving our questions and our kind of, as they say in India, doubts, or our areas where we need clarification, until we resolve those, it's hard for us to meditate on the truth. It's hard for us to meditate on the deeper understanding of the Guru's teaching, which is an integral part of the spiritual path. So we try, Amma's disciples, try hard to explain things in the light of Amma's teachings when people have confusion, because we have had lots of confusion of our own in the past. And whenever we need clarification, we also ask Amma. So otherwise, that undigested information, knowledge will possibly confuse you on the path. So we try to address these questions as a spiritual practice, not just a intellectual exercise. So the first question is, Amma one time said, "None of God's devotees have died alone." Does that mean if I'm alone and led by life chanting, and lead my life, I think it might mean, chanting the Sahasranama and attending Satsang, there will be someone by me when I die? If you could elaborate on that. A lot of people live alone and are worried about dying alone. So it's a reasonable question. To clarify, we should understand that there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. So even if a person is with us physically, we can still feel alone. We have heard stories of people who, there's families, whole families, they live there and they're all looking at their smartphones and they don't even talk with each other, even at the dinner table. Everybody's just in their own world. So, and then, one of those family members may feel lonely, even though there's a lot of people around them. And when you're in an office and everybody's focused on their own stuff, pretty much self-centered, even with a lot of people in the office, you can feel lonely. So it's not a question of a physical presence. The feeling of being alone is not due to the lack of physical presence. Loneliness actually comes from within us. It's not a question of whether someone's going to be by our side or not when we leave the body. Amma can make us feel her presence, but the trick is that we have to open the door and let her in. She has said that many times. I remember actually a very ironic incident that took place many years ago. I can't even remember when it was. Amma used to come to the Kali temple and meditate with us on Tuesdays. And all the brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, were supposed to be there from a certain time. It was a lot earlier than it is now, I think. And so we would sit there and it would be like an hour or hour and a half. And then I think we started around 9:30 or something after breakfast. And then we meditated until Amma came. And then we continued to meditate after Amma came. But what happened on one particular day, in those days, Amma used to go down from her room and then climb the spiral staircase and then come into the Kali temple. So she had to come through that sanctum sanctorum area and go through two doors to get into the Kali temple, the main hall there. So we were all sitting there waiting for Amma to come. And, it felt like it was a little long. She was taking a little more time than normal. And meanwhile, we heard somebody knocking on the door from inside the sanctum sanctorum, which is unusual because, normally people don't knock from inside there. But we were meditating, so we weren't supposed to get up, right? So we sat like that, and there was knock after knock after knock. Obviously, who was it? It was Amma, right? So it was not her, actually. It was Swamini Sri Lakshmi Prana coming with her, and she was knocking. It was very symbolic, though, that, we want to see Amma's form within us, but Amma herself is coming and knocking on the door and say, let me in, and we're not opening the door. So this is the problem that we have. Amma says that we can feel her presence, but if we have to open up our heart to her. One example is the 16th century Saint Mirabai, very well known in India and in many corners of the world. Her heart was always open to Lord Krishna, and she had so much love and longing for him that he could not stay away. Not that she couldn't stay away. He could not stay away. He would come to her. And she had so much love and longing. She wrote hundreds of poems about Lord Krishna, and ultimately she merged in him. That is how the legend goes. She never felt lonely. Even though she was, she had people there around her. She was married, but she just kind of cloistered herself in her puja room and just thought about Krishna all the time. And if you said physically, she would have been alone. There's no one in that room, it's just her. But she never felt lonely because of that presence of God within her. So if we are yearning for any physical presence in life, whether it's during our life, whether it's at the end of our life, it doesn't matter. This will only lead to disappointment and further sorrow, because the physical presence of somebody doesn't guarantee us anything. Like Amma says, we all come alone and we leave alone. When we come to this earth, we have nothing. And when we leave, we have nothing. So we should not expect a person to be there necessarily. They can't help us. They can't stop us from dying. And they can't help us in the next phase of our life when we do leave the body. So loneliness is something totally different. And Amma has a really, there's a beautiful section of her teachings, comes in chapter, I can't remember, it's like page 112 or somewhere around there in Awakened Children, Volume 8. And I'll share just a small excerpt from that. It's too long for me to read everything. The title of that section is Aloneness and Loneliness. And when somebody asks a very good question, what is the difference between being lonely and inner solitude? Because Amma had talked about inner solitude. Aloneness helps you to relax. Aloneness has nothing to do with loneliness. You can feel lonely when you are overwhelmed by thoughts and emotions. Imagine that you are living a happy family life. Your workplace is close to your home. You love to spend time with your family, and then your office suddenly sends you abroad. So you leave your home, I'm just abbreviating it, and you go to a new place overseas. When you get there, you feel intensely sad. You seem to lose all your inner strength and enthusiasm. You can't stop thinking about your family. The separation from your family makes you lonely, and you miss your family, and when you do that, you feel more vulnerable. You become the slave of your mind. In that state, you are an easy victim of any situation, and as a result, you lose your peace of mind. A lonely person is agitated and cannot feel peaceful or happy. This is what loneliness does to you. Aloneness, on the other hand, is something that happens deep within. It makes you feel contented and at peace in any situation. Whether you are physically alone or in the midst of a big crowd of foreign people in a foreign country, you will be immensely happy, and you will be spontaneous in the way you express yourself. A person who has developed this inner aloneness cannot be overpowered by emotions. He or she will never feel sad or empty. Nothing can upset the spontaneous flow of his or her heart when they're in that state. So there's a lot more about it in Awakened Children, Chapter 8, but I'll let you all read that on your own because it's so beautiful. So Amma clearly distinguishes between being alone and being lonely. So my understanding of Amma's words is that we won't feel like we're alone. We will feel Amma's presence. Of course, we will get the proper help in life also. Amma says, as a true seeker will never starve. They will be taken care of throughout their life. It doesn't mean they won't have to suffer, because even Amma's suffering sometimes, her body at least, not mentally. So we are going, if we're sincere seekers, we can expect that we will live a protected life, but at the end, doesn't matter whether there's a physical presence with it. What we really need is we need to have our mind on God. Don't think about who is going to be there physically. Then the next question is about conception and when does the soul enter that, I think it's called a zygote. Because the question is, there's a sperm, there's an egg, they meet and begin to create a human. It's a funny way of putting it. Yeah. When does the soul emerge? Good question. Only Amma knows, of course. And if you say, when does the soul emerge? The emergence of the soul has nothing to do with the zygote or conception. Because first of all, the true soul, which is going to come up in another question in a moment, that's eternal, right? And the only thing that this person is talking about is we could say the house in which that soul is temporarily going to live, so to speak, by identification with that body. The true self being all-pervasive, it cannot live inside of a body. We say deha dehi. We make a distinction like that in the Vedantic jargon, just for convenience. Deha means the body, and dehi means the indweller of the body. So that's a little bit better word, indweller. If you say indweller, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're limited to that physical figure, right? So we can go with that. Indweller is eternal, truly speaking. And the body is a temporary vehicle for it to express itself and have a reflection of consciousness and actually have a lot of karma purged through that body. So if you say, when does the soul emerge? It doesn't need a body to exist. We'll get to that in a later question tonight. But if we want to say, when does that zygote have consciousness? That is a different question altogether, right? We don't know, and I think it's a very dangerous and very highly politically charged question. But from what I understand, from Amma indirectly, she never said it directly to me, and from my understanding of the scriptures is that at some point during the pregnancy, the Vatma, or the individual soul, begins to abide or becomes the indweller of that fetus. And there are some speculation about how many months that is. I'm not going to talk about that. That's too emotionally charged and politically charged. But at some point, of course, as this person is suggesting, it's an inert seed and an inert egg, and they connect, and then where's the Jivatma? Well, it happens sometime during the pregnancy. That's all we can say. And we won't comment anymore after that. Next question. My question is, when we listen to your classes, we feel very enlightened and we try to bring it to daily practice. When we enter our daily duties as a householder and we see our family members, spouse, etc., who seem to be in pursuit of worldly things, what should we do? Is it our duty to try to educate them, even if they may not be willing to listen? or do we be silent and tolerate and let them do what they want and pray to Amma to guide them? It depends on whether you want a peaceful home life. If you don't care about your peace of mind, go ahead and try to advise them and push them in a direction that they're not interested in going. If you want any peace of mind, don't do that. Truly, we should not offer any unsolicited advice. In fact, there's a word for that in the scriptures, vanarodhanam. Giving unsolicited advice is like screaming in the forest with nobody there. Right? So it means that there's nobody listening. You're in the middle of the forest and you're shouting and you're making yourself hoarse, but there's no one there to listen. So that's why we should keep our opinions to ourselves unless asked, particularly from a family member. The exception would be if you are a guardian of a minor or somebody who doesn't have the maturity, or maybe somebody mentally challenged that needs that kind of protection, then of course you should do it. But if it's your average human being, you're someone of adult age or who's not soliciting your advice, then just keep quiet. The best way is, as Amma always says, don't wait for others to change yourself first. And so you cannot change them. It's impossible. But you can inspire them. That's all we can do. All we can do is inspire people. And perhaps, if we're lucky, touch their heart. So this is what Amma does. The only people to whom she says, you must do that you must do this, is that people that, she has the responsibility for them. Like the disciples, they come there and they surrender their spiritual path to her. And if we go, somehow in the other direction, or maybe we start making mistakes or something, it's her duty as our guru to tell us these things. But you're not a guru, and unless you're the mother of that person, then we have to really think twice before we give advice. Basically, live a life that is inspiring, live a life that is full of love and compassion and all the divine virtues, and other people will learn from you through those virtues. What I always feel is that, let's say you go to a website and you're going to learn about something, and it says, let's say you're going to learn how to sing devotional songs. And then you click, you go there and it says you have two options. You can learn through text-only version of learning how to sing Carnatic music, say, for example. Or you can have the multimedia version. Which one would you like? It's obvious. If you have the multimedia version with all the videos and the sounds and everything, who's going to want to learn from text only? So as an adult, when we talk with people around us, our words is saying, you should do that, you should do this. This is the text only version. Nobody really cares about it. But if you set an example through your actions and forget about the text version, you put it into practice. That's the multimedia version. And people will learn much more from your example than they will from your words. The other problem is that the more you offer your words as of advice, the less valuable they become. It's just like the typical rule of capitalism. When the supply is high, the demand goes down. So you want to make the market hungry for your advice. So just release the commodity of advice in very, very small bits and pieces. Just a few words, and then practice like 100 times more than you talk. And then you'll be sure that people will actually be inspired by you, and you can change them that way only. One more question here. This is a series of questions, so I'll have to go through them one by one. It's about karma, And this person's kind of confused about that, saying, if we're here in this life to work through karma, wouldn't it be helpful for us to know the history of our actions, including past lives? So the first question is, why don't we remember our past lives? And that's the sort of the follow-up on this. Wouldn't it be good for us to know the history of our actions so that we could, rectify our mistakes? And yes, in one sense, our forgetfulness actually makes it harder to evolve spiritually. But the reason is not what this person is thinking. It's not due to poor memory of our past lives that we make the same mistakes again. Really? Yes, really. You can write this down. Chapter 2, verses 63 and 64 of the Bhagavad Gita. Beautiful quote from Lord Krishna that touches on that, actually. He gives the eightfold step of human degradation or human destruction. He says, pondering on objects of the senses, one develops attachment for them. From attachment springs up desire, and desire gives rise to anger. From anger arises delusion. From delusion, unsteadiness. Unsteadiness of memory. From unsteadiness of memory comes destruction of intellect. Through the destruction of the intellect, one perishes. So, all we really need to do is look at the beginning and the ending. The ending is perishing, which doesn't mean you die necessarily spiritually. Our life is basically a waste. That sense. There's some people who just live, like mechanically, just like a robot almost, waiting for death to come or something like that. Not much different than an animal, perhaps sometimes. So that's, we're not making use of this precious human birth. So it's as good as having perished from the spiritual standpoint. And how does that start? It starts with just pondering on objects of the senses. That's the first step. Then we have 6 steps in between, and then the final last step is perishment. So it's a pretty scary series of steps that he's narrating here. And they start from a very innocuous or seemingly harmless pattern of reflecting and pondering on objects of the senses. Now, objects of the senses can be things that are neutral to us. We don't think about them, I typically use the example of a sari because I have no interest in sari. I don't dislike them, and I don't have any interest in them either. So if it's like saris, it's not the kind of thing that's going to disrupt my meditation or something like that. But there are other things that we like and dislike that we may, our mind will go towards those things. Certain kinds of food, certain kinds of circumstances, certain kinds of possessions, and the way people treat us. That can be the things that we like and the things that we dislike. We don't want someone to treat us like this. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to have this kind of food. So it's, whatever it is, whether it's a like or a dislike, it's a preference, and those things affect our mind, and the mind starts pondering over those in either a positive or a negative way. So from there, this process gets set in motion. And somewhere along the way, what he says is delusion causes unsteadiness of memory. This is about, I would say about 80% through the process. One of the last steps is that we lose our memory. What is memory? It doesn't mean that you become senile and have, the memory problems. It means that when our mind is deluded, we may do anything, even if it caused us misery last time. There are people, especially when they're addicted to something, they repeat it over and over again, even though it's painful or it gives them sorrow ultimately. They know that, but then they keep doing it. And it's just because that is delusion. The delusion that takes over the mind and corrupts the power to judge and discern the right thing in life. So delusion compromises our discernment, and then we're lost. Actually, the memory comes in between. Delusion corrupts the delusion causes us to forget that sorrow and suffering that we had, and that forgetting leads to our destruction of our intellect, and that leads to our destruction. So the point here is that it's not like we need to remember our past lives. Even in this life, we don't remember all the things that we're doing. We don't remember what happened last year. We can't remember last month, last week. What did I do every day? I can't remember that either. And even today, what did I do all day today? If you were forced to write down how you spent the whole day, I don't think any of us could remember what we did, because we're living mindlessly a lot of the time. So the reason is delusion, anger, and frustration, all these things that come from our desires. So if we want to choose the right thing, we don't have to regress into our past lives, because this is the continuation of the past lives, right? What your life now is the culmination of all those past lives. So why go backwards when you have the latest version right now? It's like instead of upgrading your software or something, you're downgrading it and going backwards. What is my mind demanding in this moment? That's what I need to look at and say, why is it demanding it? Why is it corrupting my ability to choose the right thing in life, and thus cause me sorrow and suffering? So these are the questions we should be asking ourselves. It's not about the past lives. So anyhow, Amma says that it's a blessing that we don't remember past lives, because otherwise we would have so many unsettled emotions about everyone around us, because the karmic connection from past lives is what brings people together in this life. Your family members, perhaps even your neighbors, your co-workers, your children, and other relatives. Anybody you spend a lot of time with, it's an indication that there must be something from a past life. You have something to resolve. And Amma says if we knew what they did to us and what we did to them, if we could remember all that, we would live our entire life in fear and regret. Things like that. So she says, don't feel like it would be helpful. It's actually a blessing. It's God's grace that we don't remember it all. Otherwise, we would carry a tremendous burden of guilt and fear due to our past actions. And another question this person asked was, what is the purpose of ending one's life? Hang on, I'm just scrolling down a little bit. What is the purpose of ending one's life and starting another? Well, this is obviously a question about suicide. And what we can say about this is that, people commit suicide thinking that they're going to escape perceived suffering, either the present or in the future. But not only do they fail in escaping the suffering, but they incur more karma by that action of suicide. It's not that we're criticizing them. We're saying these things, and Amma often says this kind of a thing because she's trying to discourage people who, have possibly thought about those, things in their life. Maybe they thought that they should, or they could have a more peaceful life if they didn't, if they could end this life. So Amma's always discouraging people from that line of reasoning. I remember once there was a family that came to Amma, and a family member had died, and they were crying so much. And one of the family members said to Amma, just out of sheer anguish, if we leave our bodies, then we can be with our relative again. And Amma became like Kali and told that person, no, that's not true. You cannot do that. And she very strongly told that person that it was a hint that she was thinking of committing suicide. Amma said, no, this is not the right thing. So Amma herself emphasizes the fruitfulness of that path. So it leads to even more suffering. That's the problem. And this is another example of how spiritual understanding can help us in life. If we understand the cyclical nature, that it's our karma and there's no escape from it, other than doing good deeds and also purging our karma through tapas. So that helps us to think that our karma, the circumstances that life brings to us, everything teaches us something. This is a better way to look at it, if we can. I know it's not always so easy when people are desperate. Circumstances are our guru. That's what Amma says, according to Amma. Because they teach us about ourselves. Not the true self, but the individual we are at this point in time. All the suffering in life teaches us what's going on inside of us and helps us to confront that and transcend it. But if we don't have the right attitude, the same circumstances can seem like torture. I can understand. So it's not a question of whether we face this life. It's a question of, can we escape the karma that we created for ourselves in a past life? We cannot. But there are less difficult ways in which to purge that karma or exhaust it. And that is only by proactive action. If we are inactive or more passive, then that karma will come on its own. But we can also proactively do sadhana and help the needy people in society and reduce our karma a lot that way, instead of having it come in some much more painful way. Another question is, why not just continue in one linear path rather than dying and coming back to life again? So why reincarnate? Why reincarnation? A lot of very deep questions for which I am not truly qualified to respond. But, if Amma were here, I would love to hear what she has to say. But this is what comes to me. First of all, this is the same person. They were asking, why can't we learn from our past lives? That would make it easier. And then the person's saying, why not just one linear path? So they're contradicting themselves, actually. So setting that aside, in anything, repetition is needed to learn. We don't learn lessons just in one time, typically. Like, when you have a child, the teachers the parents have to tell the child over and over again. How many times our mother or father must have told us to brush our teeth, to take a shower, take a bath, change your clothes, get out of, you can't go to school in your pajamas, you have to change your clothes. We didn't think of any of these things. We didn't know how to tie our shoes. All these things our parents repeatedly taught us, and then we finally got the message and we figured out how to do it ourselves. It's not through just one interaction. In fact, the children are also teaching the parents, and that is through repeated interactions with the children, their innocence and their enthusiasm, and some of the other things that are not so pleasant. Still, the parents learn a lot of lessons, especially patience, from their children. Another thing they say is that insanity is hereditary because parents get it from their children. Right? If you're a parent, you know that. But it's constant interaction, repeated interaction. So it's clear that it's a cyclical pattern of learning. And everything in life is a cycle, actually. The laws of conservation of mass and the law of conservation of energy, these show that everything is cyclical. We take mass from one place and then the mass, moves somewhere else. But it means there's now less mass over here and it gets cycled somewhere else. And it may not come back to the exact same place, but everything is being used and reused, used and reused. So in that sense, it is a cycle. And all the ancient civilizations that I have come in contact with have that belief in a cyclical life. And this is nature too. This is the law of nature. If you look at nature, everything is a cycle. There's the oxygen cycle and the CO2 cycle. and there's the carbon cycle, and all these minerals that go in the soil and then come out as something, and then they go back into the soil, and then the rain, the cycle of rain. I mean, everything we look at, it's a cycle, and the body does the same thing. It just has that dharma, and it does it without being told. We don't have any interaction with the body, doing all those involuntary processes. They just happen, and it's all cyclical. So the law of the whole universe is very evidently cyclical. So it makes perfect sense that our birth and rebirth would also be cyclical. It's just an inference. You can take with it. You can, do with it as you wish. I had another point about that I was going to share. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah. It's only in more recent times in Western society, particularly due to I feel like my Judeo-Christian background and the Western philosophy over the past 2,000 years perhaps, that cyclical concept of life became like a linear path. And especially after the Industrial Revolution, so to speak, or maybe from the time of the Renaissance, our way of thinking in the West, particularly, is just linear. We're going, life is getting better, science is advancing, technology, production, manufacturing, it's all like this. It's supposed to be a linear process going to some who knows where. But it's not the reality. If you work with people in each field, they will tell you that things go topsy-turvy. There was a beautiful book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, beautiful book. It shows how science goes through cycles and new paradigms come, and the old one is just basically relegated to the attic. So these kind of things are, even from our culture, they affect our mind. But in the Asian cultures, cycles are more readily received and recognized without any struggle. Yeah, it makes sense to a lot of people in the Asian cultures. Okay, here is another question. What is the difference between the Jivatma and the soul? This is the question I was referring to when I didn't go into this topic of the Jivatma or the individual soul before. Is there a difference, or is it a cultural difference in words that means the same thing? Yes, Jivatma is the soul from our standpoint. Now I have to clarify that. The condition that you have to, I would suggest that we all relinquish that word soul. If we're from a Western background, because soul means one thing. In Christianity, it means one thing. In Judaism, it means one thing. Every culture has its own interpretation of that word. So it's a little difficult. It's a little, dangerous to use that word without clarification. So if we just say Jivatma, it means the all-pervasive soul from the standpoint of the individual, the Dehi, the indweller of the body. For us, it feels like it is limited to this body, but in reality, we've been talking about that in the Gita class a lot, it's not truly limited to this body. It just feels like that. It's our own delusion. So from our standpoint, we call it the Jivatma. The Paramatma is the same soul, but looked at from the totality. So I grew up in California, and this is just an analogy. Hopefully you'll have your own version of it that you can use to understand. Where I grew up, it was a place called Palo Alto. The closest beach to us was a place called Half Moon Bay. And if I told my parents where I was going to go, I said, I'm going to Half Moon Bay. We're going to go to the beach. So I go there and I say, I'm here. I'm in Half Moon Bay. and this is Half Moon Bay in front of me. But it's not really Half Moon Bay, it's the ocean. There's only one ocean. You know, we could call it the Pacific Ocean, perhaps, but really, there's only one ocean. So, but I don't understand that. You know, I'm standing on the shore looking at the ocean, and I just drove over to Half Moon Bay. I think I'm in Half Moon Bay. That water, that's Half Moon Bay. So, same thing on the East Coast. It's Cape Cod Bay, or it could be the English Channel versus the Atlantic Ocean. You stand in Calais in France, you know, or Dover, you know, on the other side, and you say, "Oh, this is the English Channel." No, it's not. It's the Atlantic Ocean, or it's just the ocean. We can look at it either way. Both are correct depending on your level of understanding, and your reference point. So our reference point is due to the finite form defined by the contours of land. In other words, this body is defined by the contours of the body. You know, and this is what I say is me. And so I'm saying the Jivatma, it's inside this body. That's how we feel. We don't understand the vast, expansive ocean of the Paramatma. So right now, it's like we're living on land, you know, the finite body, and we just can't understand the infinite Brahman, the infinite being that is the ocean. So we find it easier to refer to the Jivatma. Once we merge in the self, we will realize that there was no difference from the beginning. So Amma's like, you know, both. When she takes a body, that body of the avatar is kind of like a tortoise. You know, it can live its whole life in the ocean if it wants to. But it comes on to land for all these people who don't know how to, you know, swim across the ocean. And so it's like Kurma Avatara, you know, one interpretation we could give to it perhaps. But it is the same, but we want to understand what that Paramatman is in reality, not limited to any form. And the last in this series of questions, this is one series of questions from one person. The last one is, what is the name of the quote-unquote place that the Jivatma or soul goes after it leaves the body? Do we go to Om, or Christians call it heaven? What do we call it? And I said, my response to this would be that, you know, first of all, we have to understand when we leave the body, right? What is leaving the body? It's not the consciousness, because the consciousness cannot move. The consciousness is all pervasive. So there's no question of whether it's going somewhere. And the body is dead anyhow. So the body is now soon going to be cremated or be food for the worms or whatever it is. It's inert. But there's something in between there, and we call that the subtle body. The subtle body consists of the energy sheath, the mental sheath, and the intellectual sheath. So we call them Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha. So these three put together comprise the subtle body, or Sukshma Shariram. This is what leaves the body, so to speak. It is a jiva who is identified with the body, or was, and who is ignorant, in other words, not God realized, which is all of us, right? So the point is that it feels like it was part of that body, but then suddenly it separates from it at the time of so-called death. And the analogy that has been given is that you have a mirror, and a mirror is basically a big piece of glass with a silvery film on the back, right? At least a modern day mirror is. So you have this big glass which doesn't reflect anything, but just that little membrane that's on the back of that pane of glass, that is the reflecting medium, right? Without that, it's just a piece of glass. So actually the body is like the glass, and that reflective film or membrane, that is the subtle body. Subtle body is the only thing that is capable of reflecting the light of consciousness. This is what Vedanta says. Amma says same thing. And so what's happening is that little reflective medium is peeling off that pane of glass, and it's free. So while it's stuck to it, it can't leave that pane of glass. But death is just the peeling off of that membrane. It's still reflecting consciousness, the thing that made this pane of glass worth anything, right? And now it's free. So until it sticks to another pane of glass, which will ultimately happen if it's not God realized. So that's what happens there. It is subtle. It's imperceptible by any of our sense organs, but it's experienceable on the subtle level. Sometimes people feel like their loved ones, the presence of their loved one, they can't explain it logically. This could be because on the subtle plane, like on the level of their subtle body, they somehow feel the presence of the subtle body of their loved one who departed. It's not impossible. So the body is made up of the the Panchabhutas, the 5 elements, but the subtle body is not made up of Panchabhutas, the 5 elements. Because 5 elements means, by definition, it's tangible. It's manifest. Before those 5 elements, the tangible 5 elements, are created in the beginning of the creation, there's another form of existence which is still there now. It's called the 5 tanmatras. 5 tanmatras, for lack of a better word, it's the subtle 5 elements. Same names, like earth, air, water, fire, etc. It is just a form that is not perceptible by the sense organs. So the mind is actually from the sattva version of that, and on. The different organs are made up of the rajas part. So it means that all of these things exist on the subtle plane. We cannot see them. And all these places that, the Indian scriptures refer to, like what happens after death, maybe based on what kind of actions you have performed in this life and in the previous ones, people need different experiences to process their karma. So it may be a pleasant experience, it may be an unpleasant experience, it may be a combination of the two. But it's a subtle world. We cannot actually see them. We don't call it, they call Swargaloka, there is a place they would refer to as heaven. It could be there, but it doesn't really matter because we're not interested in those things. We're interested in finishing off all of our karma. And the only place that we can truly advance spiritually is here on the earth. The only thing we can do in other places is process some of our karma. In other words, the good karma gets used up and then we come back to the earth. If we have a preponderance of negative karma, which if you're watching this video, I doubt that's the case, then you may have some, painful experiences to go through before you come back to the earth. But this is all subtle worlds. They happen on their own. You don't have to know about them. You don't need a map. You're going to go there anyhow. So don't worry about it. The main thing is life now on earth is the most important thing because it's the only place where we can attain God realization. Okay. Now we'll move on. My question is about the verse you mentioned in Guru Gita in terms of the importance of Guru for liberation and the other scriptures that say liberation is more of self-effort. The question is, if one puts forward their best effort to align with these 3 spiritual paths defined in Bhagavad Gita, and still there are remaining vasanas at the time of death, would the devotion to the Guru help us to burn those vasanas in the fire of knowledge? Or does one have to be reborn even if there are minimal vasanas remaining? Well, this is certainly micromanagement of vasanas. I wish I could micromanage my vasanas as much. I think we have so much I mean, my sense is that we have so much, vasanas to process that, it should be just like, I'm in this ocean of vasanas, Amma, you're my only hope. This is the way I feel, and I think it's a safer thought than thinking, well, maybe if I do one more archana today, I might not have to be reborn when I leave my body. It's not, we should think that, I'm going to do archana as many times as I can, or whatever it is. I'm going to serve the world as much as I can. That's what Amma does. She doesn't say, we don't have to sing this many bhajans tonight. You guys are almost, at God realization. She will always do the maximum. Because, even if we happen to be more advanced than we think, the world needs more vibrations. So if Amma says yes, no, it's not going to be necessary for you to be reborn because you only have a few vasanas left. What's going to happen? You think we're going to be motivated? No, we're going to be lazy. We'll fall into lethargy. So the role of the Guru is to make us want to do sadhana all the time. And whether Amma succeeds or not, that's our problem. But they make maximum effort. So our role as a disciple or devotee is to respond to that effort that she's making and do our best to emulate her example. So our effort is what invokes the Guru's grace. You could say both are true, effort and Guru's grace. They're both very important. But since the goal of liberation is an infinite one, right? Liberation is not like something you can calculate. It's infinite. We want something infinite. So no matter how much we strive, our efforts are going to remain finite, and thus can never result in moksha on their own. Even if we say, oh, there's spiritual wisdom, or I'm going to get jnana from the scriptures, that knowledge is what liberates us. But, and it's not the actions we do that liberates us. But without the help or the grace of the Guru, we can never attain that knowledge either. So people like Ramana Maharshi are exceptions to the rule. And Amma says for them, in a past life, they had Guru many times. And so that's how they got to that point where they were right at the, threshold of God realization. Don't compare yourself with Ramana Maharishi, whatever you do. With billions of people on the planet, that we only have one Ramana Maharishi, and the lazy people like to point to him. So that's the lazy man's path. Don't look at that. Look at what Amma does, because she is our best example. And yes, the fire of the Guru's self-knowledge has the capacity to burn all of our vasanas, but we should be worthy of that. We should invoke that grace. Amma's beyond everything. So by surrendering to her and following her teachings, we can transcend all of our negativities. But the problem is, following Amma's teachings is the hardest thing. And you don't have to worry about starting all over again. We try our best to follow Amma's example. And if you're afraid that you might not complete the process before you leave your body, then read, I think it was the last section of chapter 6 of the Gita. It's called the Yoga Brashta section of the Gita, where Krishna describes what happens to the person who leaves their body before attaining God realization. And it's a very sort of encouraging description. It should encourage us to make the effort and don't think about whether we're going to realize this birth or not. Because he says in the next birth, you resume where you left off. So if you want to leave off way behind, then don't make effort. If you want to resume, closer to God, then keep making efforts throughout your life. Here's a funny question. If ignorance is bliss, why do people seek knowledge? Seems like this person doesn't want to make the effort to seek knowledge because maybe it'll be blissful if I'm ignorant. Well, these are simply adages. The adage of ignorance is bliss, it's just humorous. It's not a spiritual truth. One comedian said something, and I remember this from a long time ago. He said, they told me in school practice makes perfect. Then later on, someone said, nobody's perfect. So I stopped practicing. I didn't do my homework. I didn't do, it's like, this is the lazy person's philosophy, right? The truth of ignorance and what it actually creates can be verified by all the suffering we see in the world, past, present, and future. Spiritual ignorance certainly does not create bliss. What creates bliss is only one thing: love for God. And that means to really have love for God. We went through this in the Gita in the past few sections. By now you all hopefully understand that proper understanding of God is the only way we can have true love for God. We may think that we're a great devotee, but if we don't have proper understanding of God, then our devotion is very immature. So, ignorance of ourself, ignorance of God is the same thing. And if we want to have bliss, we have to reconcile that, eliminate it through deeper spiritual understanding. One more question is the answers to my questions seem to be coming from within. Is it important to check and make sure they are right? Please advise. Of course, the person asking this question gives me the feeling that they have a little bit of a doubt inside whether that is really the case. So this is a common question. How do I know whether it is Amma giving me an answer or just my mind? How do I know whether what comes to me is reliable or whether I should question, these ideas or answers that come to me? So there are different ways that we can test that, different litmus tests, I guess you could say. What I use, just my own experience, is something which basically is the same as the golden rule that we, talk about in Western culture. There's also something, if you're a philosopher, you would know Kant's, the philosopher Kant's categorical imperative. All these things are basically the same as what Amma says about the definition of dharma. Whatever provides the most benefit to the most number of people for the longest period of time. It's not what's convenient for us, it's what's best for everybody. So the golden rule was do to others as you would have them do to you. Kant's categorical imperative was that we should ask in such a way, if I remember it properly, we should act in such a way that we could reasonably recommend that everybody should do such a thing. If it's good for everybody to do it, then it's okay for me to do it. So when the mind says something like, just throw the garbage over here, I know that's not the person's question, but there'll be like this, everybody's throwing their garbage. Just throw your garbage there, somebody will pick it up. I mean, it's a poor example, but the idea is that if everybody does that, of course, we're going to have a world full of litter. So we should not do things that are bad, not only if we do it. We might say, it's just one person, I can do this or do that. I can waste a little water, something like that. I can leave the light on if I want. But what if everybody did that? Don't separate yourself and say, I'm just one person, it doesn't matter. What should be the guiding principle is, what if everybody did the same thing? Would it be good for the world or not? So ultimately, we need to arrive at that option that creates the highest good for the maximum number of people for the maximum amount of time. This is the way we can judge dharma, which is the guiding principle of all of our actions. Of course, if you are someone like Buddha, and you have to think of your spiritual path, whether to live in the palace or, renounce the world, it's different. But how many Buddhas are there? We should start with the assumption that we're just one person on this planet, and And if everybody were to do it, the same thing as us, what would the outcome be? Last question we have, and I know I'm a little over my time limit, sorry. How much time should one spend volunteering at places like food banks, etc.? Is once a month enough? Does volunteering have the same effect on us as chanting or bhajans? Or can one of these substitute for volunteering? So I'm going to take that word volunteering as karma yoga or selfless action, selfless service. Of course, the amount of time that is needed or is recommended depends on the individual. Of course, if you have 3 kids, small kids, just serving those kids is going to take up all your time, I would imagine, especially if you're a single parent. Or if, you don't have enough help from your extended family, etc. So these things cannot be responded in a universal way. Depends on how healthy you are, how old you are, what other commitments you have, how busy you are at work. So I won't say this in a sweeping generalization, but based on your attitude and dedication, it could be a variety of responses. If you just do it once with your full heart, seeing God in all these needy people, that itself is a profound experience and will affect how frequently you have to do it. And certain things, one lesson may be enough to convince us of something good. But to stop our bad habits, typically we need a lot more practice and we need a lot more repetition of something. I'll give you an example. If you're having a baby, just one delivery for that baby is enough so much pain and so much concern, that is enough to make us feel that baby is so precious, and feel so much love for that for that newborn baby. You don't need to give birth like 10 times for each part of the body just to appreciate that child. One time is good enough. Same thing with a marriage. Most people get married to that person once. You don't have to repeat the wedding over and over again to appreciate just how wonderful and holy that matrimony is. So like that, but good things, typically you don't have to repeat them too many times. But with our negative tendencies, we need a lot more practice. So when, for example, if we do a bad thing as a kid, our parents will spank us. These days, I don't know, they might call 911. But, if you're my age or younger, we got spankings, and not just once, right? Because we needed that painful lesson to rectify some of our, negative tendencies. So the good things don't always have to be repeated because they're so touching. But, our negative tendencies, we typically need to repeat things that reduce those so that we can completely expunge those negativities. So selfless service is for inner purification, essentially. And we need a lot of that. How many vasanas, negativities do we have? We don't even want to count them. It's too many of them. And if selfless service is the only way to remove these, as the scriptures say, and as Amma says, purification is our number one responsibility right now, internal purification. So there's really no question of how long I should do selfless service. Just keep doing it until the Guru tells you to stop. And maybe the Guru will never tell you to stop because the Guru herself is still doing it, at her age. So the other byproducts that come from selfless service are not the main purpose of it. And similarly, bhajans and chanting have their own purpose, which is that of chitta ekagrata, which means one-pointedness of mind. And which means actually that's what good love for God is, one-pointedness. So singing bhajans and chanting is good for getting concentration, but it does not address the issue of inner purification directly. Inner purification may come as a byproduct of chanting or bhajans, but it's not the main intention of it. So all these things are there for a reason. We need them all. Otherwise, Amma wouldn't do any seva. She would just sing bhajans all day and have Lalita Sahasranama all day. She doesn't do that. So we should learn from her. Why is she doing all these things? There must be a reason. Even if we don't know the reason, we should just do it, trusting her wisdom. And another thing is, if your mind seeks to substitute something else for volunteering, take that as a hint that you need to overcome that preference of the mind. And that means you should do extra volunteering, because the mind has shown that it's trying to wiggle out of it. Something it doesn't like something about that. Typically, you're not done with something until the mind lets go of likes and dislikes about that kind of activity, that sadhana. So if the mind is resisting something, it's a good sign that we should actually practice it more till we overcome that like and dislike. So it also means when the mind is wanting to do a lot of other things that are not sadhana, that shows like a bias towards something else other than sadhana. So we should reduce those things that disrupt our sadhana. And in the field of sadhana, we should give the requisite effort to the types of sadhana that the mind has a resistance to. Otherwise, we'll never, it's like, create a balance. We can only create a balance when all the likes and dislikes are neutralized. Doesn't mean we become a robot. It means we become impervious to change. That's the important thing. And we all want to be peaceful under all circumstances, right? So that's what this helps us attain. So this finishes all of the questions for today. And we will have a Bhagavad Gita class on Thursday. And I invite you all to join that. And now we'll have some bhajans.
അമൃതേശ്വരീൻ ഹൃദയവിപഞ്ചിയിൽ ഉണരുന്ന സ്വരരാഗം നീ. 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 ആനാദലഹരിയിൽ ഞാനെന്നും ദർശിക്കും വിദ്യാ സരസ്വതി നീന്തേ ജീവിത സർവസ്വം നീ. ആനാദലഹരിയിൽ ഞാനെന്നും ദർശിക്കും വിദ്യാ സരസ്വതി നീന്തേ ജീവിത സർവസ്വം നീ. നിൻ മൃദുഹാസമെൻ അന്തരംഗത്തിലൂർ ആയിരം വെൺതിങ്കളായി. നിൻ മൃദുഹാസമെൻ അന്തരംഗത്തിലൂർ ആയിരം വെൺതിങ്കളായി. നിൻ കടാക്ഷത്തിൻ്റെ കാരുണ്യ തന്നലിൽ ജ്ഞാനലിന്നില്ലാതയായി. ജ്ഞാനലിന്നില്ലാതയായി. നിൻ കടാക്ഷത്തിൻ്റെ കാരുണ്യ തന്നലിൽ ജ്ഞാനലിന്നില്ലാതയായി. ജ്ഞാനലിന്നില്ലാതയായി. അമൃതേശ്വരീൻ ഹൃദയവിപഞ്ചിയിൽ ഉണരുന്ന സ്വരരാഗം നീ. നിൻ ചലങ്ങളിൽ നോരുന്നു മൊയ്ടും സുന്ദര സ്വപ്നങ്ങളായി. നിൻ ചലങ്ങളിൽ നോരുന്നു എന്നോടെ സുന്ദര സ്വപ്നങ്ങളായി. നിൻ ചലങ്ങളിൽ നോരുന്നുമെന്നോടെ സുന്ദര സ്വപ്നങ്ങളായി. നിൻ ചലങ്ങളിൽ നോരുന്നുമെന്നോടെ ചാരുരൂപമെന്നോമനിച്ചിടാതോ ഓർമ്മകളില്ലാതെയായി. നിൻ ചാരുരൂപമെന്നോമനിച്ചിടാതോ ഓർമ്മകളില്ലാതെയായി. ഇന്ദ്രിതയേശ്വരി ഇന്ദിരിതി സ്പന്ദനം നിൻ കീർത്തനാലാപമായി. നിൻ കീർത്തനാലാപമായി. ഇന്ദ്രിതയേശ്വരി ഇന്ദിരിതി സ്പന്ദനം നിൻ കീർത്തനാലാപമായി. നിൻ കീർത്തനാലാപമായി. അമൃതേശ്വരി ഹൃദയ വിഭഞ്ജിയൻ ഉണരുന്ന സ്വരരാഗം നീ. ആനാദലഹരിയിൽ ഞാനെന്നും ദർശിക്കും വിദ്യാ സരസ്വതി നീ. ജീവിത സർവസ്വമേ. ആനാദലഹരിയിൽ ഞാനെന്നും ദർശിക്കും വിദ്യാ സരസ്വതി നീ. ജീവിത സർവസ്വമേ. ജീവിത സർവസ്വമേ. ജീവിത സർവസ്വമേ.
जय गणेश जय एकदंत जय लंबोदर विष्णु.
जय गणेश जय एकदंत जय लंबोदर विष्णु.
जय गणेश जय एकदंत जय लंबोदर विष्णु. जय गणेश सुत पार्वती नंदन जय विघ्नेश विभो. जय गणेश सुत पार्वती नंदन जय विघ्नेश विभो. जय गणेश जय एकदंत जय लंबोदर विष्णु. जय महेश सुत पार्वती नंदन जय विघ्नेश विभो. विघ्नराज तुम भीमकाय तुम दे दो विजय हमें. विघ्नराज तुम भीमकाय तुम दे दो विजय हमें. विघ्नराज तुम भीमकाय तुम दे दो विजय हमें. विघ्नराज भजतुं भीमकायतुं देदो विजयः मे
प्रणवरूपतुं वक्रतुण्डतुं हङ्गोतुं वरदो
प्रणवरूपतुं वक्रतुण्डतुं हमकोतुं वरदो
प्रणवरूपतुं वक्रतुण्डतुं हङ्गोतुं वरदो
प्रणवरूपतुं वक्रतुण्डतुं हमकोतुं वरदो
जय गणेश जय एकदन्त जय लम्बोदर विष्णु
जय गणेश जय महेश सुत पार्वती नन्दन जय विघ्नेश विभो
स्वर्णवर्णतं देव पूजतं मूषिकवाहनतं
स्वर्णवर्णतुं देव पूजतुं मूषिकवाहनतुं
स्वर्णवर्णतं देव पूजतं मूषिकवाहनतं
स्वर्णवर्णतुं देव पूजतुं मूषिकवाहनतुं
धर्मबुद्धिदो दिव्यदृष्टिदो सर्वविघ्नहरतुं
धर्मबुद्धिदो दिव्यदृष्टिदो सर्वविघ्नहरतुं
जय गणेश जय एकदन्त जय लम्बोदर विष्णु
जय महेश सुत पार्वती नन्दन जय विघ्नेश विभो
जय महेश सुत पार्वती नन्दन जय विघ्नेश विभो
जय गणेश जय एकदन्त जय लम्बोदर विष्णु
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 जय महेश सुत पार्वती नन्दन जय विघ्नेश विभो
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 जय गणेश जय एकदन्त जय लम्बोदर विष्णु
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 जय महेश सुत पार्वती नन्दन जय विघ्नेश विभो
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 He Govinda, He Gopal, He Govinda, He Gopal, He Govinda, He Gopal, He Govinda, He Gopal. Uddhara mam dinam atidinam balahinam. 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 He Govinda, He Gopal, He Govinda, He Gopal. Uddhara mam dinam atidinam balahinam. Uddhara mam dinam atidinam balahinam. He Gopal, He Gopal. Vihita vihinam viparaya jnanam. Vihita vihinam viparaya jnanam. Vihita vihinam viparaya jnanam. Vihita vihinam viparaya jnanam. Sanchita sarva kalusha kalapam. Sanchita sarva kalusha kalapam. Sanchita sarva kalusha kalapam. Sanchita sarva kalusha kalapam. He Govinda, He Gopal, He Govinda, He Gopal. Uddhara mam dinam atidinam balahinam. Uddhara mam dinam atidinam balahinam. He Govinda, He Gopal. Vedam na jane, Vedyam na jane, 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 Dhyanam na jane, Deyam na jane, Dhyanam na jane, Deyam na jane, Vedam na jane, Vedyam na jane, Vedam na jane, Vedyam na jane, Dhyanam na jane, Deyam na jane, Dhyanam na jane, Deyam na jane. Mantram na jane, tantram na jane, 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 arkhyam na jane, padyam 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 na jane. He Govinda, He Gopala, He Govinda, He Gopala, Uddhara Mam Deenam Ati Deenam Balahinam, Uddhara Mam Deenam Ati Deenam Balahinam, He Govinda, He Gopala, He Govinda, He Gopala. Visions of the riches gave us sign, showing us how peace can reign in every life, to become a ray of light for those who live in endless night. Ignorance has always led to indifference has warned us countless times before. Intellect can do no more in the quest to reach our goal. Ignorance has always led to war. Indifference has warned us countless times before. Intellect can do no more in the quest to reach our goal. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Close your eyes, forget the names and forms.
bhavantu. We pray these words will come true.
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. We pray these words may come true.
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. We pray these words will come true.
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. We pray these words may come true.
We pray these words will come true.
We pray these words may come true.
We pray these words will come true.
Bale Ambike Jnana Deviye Bale Ambike Appe Lakshmiye
Bale
Ambike Jnana Deviye Bale Ambike Appe Lakshmiye Bale Ambike Jnana Deviye Bale Ambike Appe Lakshmiye Bale Ambike Jnana Deviye Bale Ambike Appe Lakshmiye Devi Bale Bale Appe Parvati 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 Jayatu Ambike Jayatu Taye Jayatu Ambike Jayatu Taye Jayatu Ambike Jayatu Taye Jayatu Ambike Jayatu Taye Jayatu 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 Jaganmayi 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 Bale Ambike Jnana Deviye Bale Ambike Appe Lakshmiye ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇವಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಗಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಗಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಗಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಗಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಮನಕ ಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಮನಕ ಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಮನಕ ಬಲ್ಪಾದ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಮನಕ ಬಲ್ಪಾದ ವೇದ ವಿಸ್ಮಯೋ ಹಿರಿನ ಮಹಿಮೆ ವೇದ ವಿಸ್ಮಯೋ ಹಿರಿನ ಮಹಿಮೆ ವೇದ ವಿಸ್ಮಯೋ ಹಿರಿನ ಮಹಿಮೆ ವೇದ ವಿಸ್ಮಯೋ ಹಿರಿನ ಮಹಿಮೆ ಹಿರನ ಪ್ರೇಮ ಜ್ಯೋತಿಯೇ ಬಾಲಗ ಬಲ್ಪ 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 ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇವಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇವಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಂತೋಷ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಾಂತ್ವನ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಾಂತ್ವನ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಾಂತ್ವನ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಕೊರಲೆ ಸಾಂತ್ವನ ಬಲೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ತೋಜಲೆ ದೇವಿ ಶಕ್ತಿನ 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 ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಪ್ರೇಮ ದೇಹಿ ಜೋ ಕ್ಲೇನು ಕಾಪುಲೆ 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 ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇವಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜ್ಞಾನ ದೇವಿಯೇ ಬಲೆ ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಲಕ್ಷ್ಮಿಯೇ ದೇವಿ ಬಲೆ ಬಲೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ದೇವಿ ಬಲೆ ಬಲೆ ಅಪ್ಪೆ ಪಾರ್ವತಿ ಜಯತು ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಯತು ತಾಯೇ ಜಯತು ಅಂಬಿಕೆ ಜಯತು ತಾಯೇ ಜಯತು 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 ಜಗನ್ಮಯಿ 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 ಜಯತು Jayatu Jayatu Jaganmayi.
Jayatu 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 Jaganmayi. Jayatu 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 Jaganmayi.
Okay, let me show. Okay. Okay, hang on. Okay. Om Jaya Jaya Jagajanani Vande Amritanandamayi Mangala-arati Mata Bhavani Amritanandamayi Mata Amritanandamayi Janamana Nija Sukhadaini Mata Amritanandamayi Mangalakarini Vande Janani Amritanandamayi Mata Amritanandamayi Sakalagama Nigamadishu Charite Amritanandamayi Nikhila Mayahara Janani Vande Amritanandamayi Mata Amritanandamayi Prema Rasamrita Varshini Mata
Amritanandamayi. Prema Bhakti Sandayini Mata Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Shamadamadaini Manalayakarini Amritanandamayi. Satatam mama hridi Vasatam Devi Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Patithodhara nirantara hridayi Amritanandamayi. Paramahamsa padanilaye Devi Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. He Janani Jani Maranani Varini Amritanandamayi. He Srita Jana Paripalini Jayatam Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Surajana Pujita Jaya Jagadamba Amritanandamayi. Sahaja Samadhi Sudhanye Devi Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Om Jaya Jaya Jagajanani Vande Amritanandamayi. Mangala Arati Mata Bhavani Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Mata Amritanandamayi. Jai Bolo Sadguru Mata Amritanandamayi Devi Ki Jai. Let us all spend a few moments in meditation before we close tonight's program. Check your posture. Slow down your breathing and close your eyes. With each long, deep breath, feel your body and mind relaxing further and further. Feel a powerful divine presence all around you. Amma's subtle presence enveloping you and holding you tight against her. feel as though you are having her darshan in her loving embrace. Now focus your awareness on the rhythmic flow of your breathing process. Breathe with a deep feeling. And remain fully focused on the breath. Now as you breathe in, feel the vibrations of the sound Ma resonating in the ingoing breath. And similarly, as you breathe out, feel the vibrations Om in the outgoing breath. Breathe in, feeling Ma, divine love, and breathe out, feeling Om, divine light. As though you are replacing your breath with the peaceful and powerful vibrations of Ma and Om. Ma. Let us continue for a few more minutes, feeling the vibrations as deeply as we can. Slowly, the vibrations of Ma and Om begin to fade away and disappear, culminating in a deep inner silence. There's no thoughts, simply complete stillness. And you immerse yourself in that complete tranquility. Like the lotus flower unfurls its petals and opens wide to receive the warmth and nourishment of the sun's rays. Feel your heart opening up completely to receive the warmth of Amma's love, her universal love, and the nourishing power of her divine grace. Feel yourself basking in that love and divine grace, and remain in that state, blissfully basking in her presence. Om Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Namah Shivaya. See you again very soon.